Today I'm going to show you how to make a 100% whole wheat loaf of sourdough. I'm using 250 grams of hard white wheat fresh milled. Then I'm using 250 grams of hard red wheat fresh milled. About 7 grams of diastatic malt powder or barley malt powder. This is optional. It makes a very slight difference in the dough, but not enough, whereas if you don't have it, it's fine. You don't have to use it. Then 12 grams of pink salt. You can also just use sea salt. And then I'm using 100 grams of unfed whole wheat sourdough starter. This is still healthy starter. It's been fed within the last week, but it's not freshly fed and active. So you can do this with discard, but I wouldn't recommend doing it with starter that's been sitting in the back of your fridge for several months. It should be a healthy starter. And then 425 grams of water. And I mix all of that together with my spatula and with my hand to get all the dry bits of flour soaked in. Once you have all of the water absorbed into the flour, you can go ahead and cover your dough, and you are going to let it rest for 30 minutes. Then it's time to do your first set of stretches and folds. I like to get my hand wet and then just gently pull the dough, and I work counterclockwise and just pull each section of the dough going around in a circle. I might do 8 or 9 or so of these. I go for as long as the dough allows me to go until I start meeting too much resistance and the dough is too tight. That is when I stop. Then once I get as far around as I can go, I like to pick up the whole dough ball and then just kind of roll it under itself and flip it over so the smooth side is on top. And then we are going to cover this loaf again and let it rest for 30 minutes before doing our next set of stretches and folds. Okay, we are about to do our second set of stretches and folds here. Same thing as I did the first time, and you can see how the dough is stretching more than it was the first time, so the gluten is developing. And I just work my way around, and then eventually I will roll this dough ball under itself to allow the smooth side to be on top again. After we have completed the set of stretches and folds, I allow the dough to rest for another 30 minutes, and then we do it a third time. We are going to do a total of 4 sets of stretches and folds over 2 hours of time. Okay, this is the third set of stretches and folds, and you can watch how the dough is transforming with each set. It's coming together nicely now. The dough ball is very smooth and elastic. Again, I like to roll the rough side under and keep the smooth side on top. We're going to cover it, do one more 30-second rest, and then do our fourth set of stretches and folds. Here we are now with that fourth set of stretches and folds. The dough is really fluffy and light feeling. That's one thing I love about fresh milled flour, is the dough just feels really sparkly. I don't know if that's the right adjective for this, but that's just what it feels like to me. After I complete that set, I like to put it in a clear-sided container, and then I get my hand kind of wet so that the dough doesn't stick to my hand, and then I use the back of my hand to push the dough flat so I can get an idea of the amount of volume of the dough, so that I can monitor the percent rise better. I like to check the temp, so I stick a meat thermometer in there, and my dough is 72 degrees. So with 72 degrees, I'm going to go somewhere between a 50% rise and a 75% rise. So I'll probably aim for around 60% or so. I'm going to use an Expo marker to mark where my dough is starting and mark a spot that is about a 60% rise based on the volume. This is a glass measuring bowl, so it has markings on the side that I can use to help me. If you have questions about why I'm aiming for 60%, make sure you check out the link in the description because the post will have more information on that. Okay, so now it's been about 5 hours and my bulk fermentation is over. And you can see all the bubbles on the side there, and how the dough is very loose and jiggly. So here I'll kind of wiggle the dough so you can see how wobbly it is. This is also just because it is such a high hydration dough. It's about 85% hydration or so. I'm going to do a pre-shape, which is where I put some rice flour down. I'm going to get my dough out of the container here, and I'm going to kind of loosely form it into a ball. And we do this just to help it get ready to set up structure. And to do that, I like to do kind of the stretch and fold thing again. I just kind of pull my edges into the middle and fold it in, tuck it in, trying to make it kind of tight. I work my way around, and then once I get it good enough, I can grab my bench scraper, and it helps me pick it up. This dough is very sticky, and I just get it, put the smooth side up, and kind of do some tuck and rolls here. This just helps get the shape more even and creates a little bit of tension. This is just a pre-shape, so I'm not making it perfect yet. I'm going to let this sit about 20 minutes, and then I'll come back for the final shape. Alright, so now it is time to do my final shaping, and I'm going to make this into an oblong loaf or batard. I'm putting a little rice flour on top just to keep it from sticking to my counter since this is a wet dough. If I see some air bubbles, I like to pop those because otherwise they'll create gaping holes between the bread and the crust when it bakes, and you don't really want that to happen. Okay, so I'm lightly flattening it out here. I'm putting it smooth side down, lightly flattening it out. I'm not pressing too hard despite what it might look like. I'm just shaping it into a square or rectangle. And now I'm going to get ready to pull one edge about 2/3 of the way over there, just so there's a 1/3 left open on the other side. And I press down to create a seam. And then we do the same with the other side. I pull and stretch it all the way over to the edge there and press it down to create a seam. Now, I'm not the best shaper in the world. I can get by and get it to work. Here I'm now rolling it up. I'm usually a little too rough when I do that part, but we get through it and they turn out okay. So I've got it rolled up. I'm pinching the ends the best that I can. And then once I get the ends relatively closed, I like to just kind of pull it a little bit to create a little more surface tension on the dough. But again, you can see I'm not the world's most skilled shaper, so I'm just getting through. Using my bench scraper, I pick it up, and now I use both hands to kind of slide it in, and I kind of pull on the dough to make more surface tension as I drop it into the basket there too. Now I'm doing what's called stitching to, again, just keep that tension on the smooth side that is now down in the proofing basket there. And once again, you can see my non-expert way at doing this, but when all is said and done, it works just fine. There we go. This is going to go in the fridge overnight. I refrigerated it for about 12 hours covered, and then we will bake in the morning. All right, I am going to preheat my baking vessel. I am using a stone baker that's kind of an oblong shape. I think it's about a 3-quart stone baker from Pampered Chef that I bought used on Facebook Marketplace. And I'm putting that in the oven and starting it to 450 degrees to preheat. Once it preheats, I take my dough out of the fridge, and I have a dough sling that I absolutely love. It makes this all so much easier, and I usually use just a small cutting board to help me keep it stable as I turn it over. I pull my basket off, and we can see it proofed nicely. I like to do a score just right down the middle. My dough lame's a little bit dull. I need probably a new blade on that, but it is what it is. After scoring, I go ahead and I pull the preheated stone baker out of the oven, and I'm going to put this directly in that hot baker. I didn't get this part on camera very well, but what I do is I just lift it into my baker, and then I'm going to grab a bottle of spray water. It's just water in here, and I spray the top of my loaf about 10 times or so. This just helps create steam inside and keeps the crust from setting too early so we can get the best oven rise that we can. So just like, I don't know, 5 to 10 sprays right on top of the dough. Cover it up and put it in the oven to bake for 30 minutes. Okay, it's been 30 minutes, so I'm going to remove the top of the baker so now we can get some direct heat onto the loaf. You can take a look at the oven rise there. It's looking nice. We're going to turn the heat down. It's at 450 right now. We're just going to reduce it a little bit to 425, and then go for somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes. I like to do 13 minutes. All right, so now the loaf is done, and I've brought it out of the oven. It's a little hard to see, but I'm using my dough sling, grabbing the edges of that to bring it out onto the cooling rack. So you can see it's nice and brown now. It got browned when we removed the lid. And now it just needs to cool for, I like to do 6 hours. You should let it come down to room temperature. Now, of course, you don't have to. You can cut your bread whenever you want. But if you want to protect the interior from getting too gummy or anything, it's best to let it completely cool until the loaf is all the way to room temperature before slicing. I tried to get a video of me slicing this, and I had technical difficulties, but I used my meat slicer to slice my bread. I like to make slices all at once because my kids can just grab them on their own. But look how beautifully this turned out. It has a nice light airy crumb. It's not dense at all, so it's so easy to make whole grain bread really dense when you make it at home, and that's why I love this method, because it really produces a very nice loaf. One thing to keep in mind is the gluten structure in these whole grain breads, completely whole grain, is not quite as good as white flour, so that's why I like using these stone bakers that hug the loaf tightly. You saw how my baker was really hugging the loaf, and that can just help as it's baking to make sure it gets a good rise too. That's my non-expert tip and trick there. But anyway, we love this bread. It comes out really well, and I hope you guys give this a try. Be sure to check out the description on this video for a link to my blog post where I go into detail on the process a lot more thoroughly. So if you have any questions, please make sure to check out that post. Thanks.